The dish went cold before the truth was served. Welcome to Faded Echoes. I am your host, Ombra. Let me know where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Your words truly warm this community. Let's dive in. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and we were 3 minutes shy of Fritz's daily sacrament to the household god called lunch. In our temple, the altar is linen and silver, the priest is Swiss, and the congregation is limited. The service is not to be interrupted by salesmen, sheriffs, or civilization in any of its noisier uniforms. I was at my desk in the office, going through a stack of bills that had the stamina of goats, and Nero Wolfe was behind his, testing the tensile strength of the latest national magazine by pretending to read it while waiting for the beer to arrive. "Your attention," he said without looking up, "is excessive for those papers." "Because yours is excessive for that article," I told him. "If we both act like adults, Fritz won't have to worry whether the veal will cool while you pretend to be a clam." He grunted. Wolfe can use one syllable for opinions that would take lesser men an afternoon. I filed the last bill into the drawer marked later, which I keep different from the drawer marked much later. The doorbell nudged the air. We have rules about the doorbell. Most of them add up to me getting it. I made it to the hall, glanced back at the office to make sure Wolfe wasn't making a break for freedom. He wasn't, and opened up. The woman on the stoop didn't match the weather or my prejudice about people who ring at lunch. She was late 30s, packaged neat, the kind who knows how much space she takes up and charges rent for it. Her coat was good camel hair, and her face wasn't asking for favors. She had a paper bag in her arms, the kind you get at delicatessens with the pastrami sweating through by the time you're halfway home. "Mr. Goodwin?" she asked. "That depends," I said. "If this is about religion, we have a house deacon who handles that. If it's about money, I'm Mr. Goodwin. If it's about Mr. Wolfe, take a breath." "It's about heat," she said, hugging the bag. "And Mr. Wolfe. Heat is a subject central to our household, mainly because Fritz has hard feelings about any that escapes." "Come in," I told her, and took her to the office. Wolfe set the magazine down and let his eyes climb to her face like a man tackling stairs he didn't order. I did the honors. "This is Mr. Wolfe. You're Lydia Armitage," she said, "from the Rialto Club." I saw Wolfe's eyelids react like he'd just heard that orchids had learned to sing. The Rialto Club is a Broadway-adjacent dining room that pretends it isn't. The food's good, the wine is better, and the prices are a joke that doesn't laugh with you. "Miss or Mrs.?" I asked. "Mrs.," she said. "But that's antique information. May I sit?" Wolfe inclined his head, and I gave her the red leather chair that has seen more confessions than most churches. She sat, put the paper bag on her knees, and set her hands on top of it as if afraid it would jump. "We are about to eat," Wolfe told her, like a judge announcing the time of day. "I prefer not to discuss business during meals." "This is about a meal," she shot back. "One of yours." That pried both of his eyebrows up. Before he could issue a denial or a sneer, Wolfe can use either as punctuation. Fritz appeared with the tray. Beer for Wolfe, water for me, and a look at the visitor that belonged in a museum case labeled Inquiring Mind. He got the message from my eyes and went away noiselessly, a talent that has kept him on payroll since Hoover was a noun. "Explain," Wolfe said. Mrs. Armitage swallowed. "We prepare a dish for you weekly, a cassoulet. It goes out at 11:30 sharp and is at your door by noon. You pay us excoriating money for it and send back a note either praising or correcting. The notes were useful." I turned to Wolfe. "You've been cheating on Fritz?" "I do not cheat," he said coldly. "I research. Fritz's cassoulet has been known to make grown men reconsider their diets and their marriages. If Wolfe was dabbling in outside versions, that was a development I'd have appreciated hearing about before lunch. "So what's the problem, Mrs. Armitage?" "The last 2 deliveries," she said, tapping the bag, "arrived cold." Now that is a statement that carries in our house. Fritz once told the furnace he would move out if it didn't improve its tone. The carrier? I asked. Did he stop to teach them bridge on 34th Street? We have a runner, she said. Milo. He's diligent. He's frightened of me. And I rode alongside him today. On a bicycle, Mr. Goodwin, in a coat I like, to make certain nothing interfered. We left the kitchen at 11:37. We came straight here, and when we arrived, I opened the package. It was cold. She lifted the bag and set it on my desk. The paper made a noise like somebody folding a grievance. I gave Wolfe a look. He gave me the shrug that means proceed and be damned. I took the container out, unsnapped the lid, and let my nose make the first reconnaissance. You don't need a thermometer to know when a thing has lost its fervor. The aromatics were fine, duck confit, the beans in their proper humility, garlic asserting itself, but the heat had packed its bags. Fritz will stage a revolution, I warned. Fritz will restrain himself, Wolfe said. Madam, as you saw fit to demonstrate the fact, rather than merely assert it, I must assume you desire some redress. I desire an explanation, she said. Because this isn't merely about your lunch, Mr. Wolfe. What goes to you is our standard bearer. We send out only after we've been satisfied by its twin. Twice now, the twin. In-house has been perfect, piping, as the reviewers say. Twice now, yours has arrived as if it took a sea voyage. Someone is meddling, with us or with you. Wolfe lifted his beer, regarded it, and set it down untouched. That, in our calendar, qualifies as an eclipse. Your interest in my alimentary comfort is flattering but insufficient cause to bicycle across Manhattan. She met his look. We have a reputation, and an enemy. Possibly two. Last week a food blogger, one of the loud ones, hinted that we rely more on theater than temperature. Our reservations dipped. The day after, the cassoulet to you went cold. Today, we were careful, and it went cold again. If my own people are sabotaging me, I must know. If yours are sabotaging you, that's a different stage and a different audience, and I don't want to play on it. Name your enemy, Wolfe said. Julian Cates, she said. He runs a pop-up that thinks permanence is a moral flaw. He's clever and cruel. Also, my ex-husband is back in town and trying to buy into the club through proxies. He has a talent for making trouble feel like weather. Wolfe closed his eyes, which for him is not escape but focus. He opened them again. Your ex-husband's name? Evan Armitage. I made a note because when a woman says an ex's name with that kind of flatness, they've learned to underline it later. Who had hands on the dish? I asked. From ladle to hallway. My chef de cuisine, Tarek, my sous, Ava, me, briefly, our runner, Milo. I saw each step. The twins were sealed together. I opened yours here and, well, who knows you supply me? Wolfe asked. 3 people in-house, not counting me and the owners. Tarek, Ava, Milo, and Mr. Cates. Because nothing is private for long, and he has spies. Also Evan, because he always does. We will eat, Wolfe said abruptly. Mr. Goodwin will reseal that abomination and place it in the refrigerator on the lowest shelf, far to the right. After lunch, you will tell me what I already know and what you hope I don't. She stood. I didn't come to be insulted. Then you came to the wrong address, I told her cheerfully. But since you're here, take the tour. Mr. Wolfe will not insult you while chewing. Company policy. She looked between us and then let out the kind of breath that deflates an argument before it grows a spine. Very well, she said. But I'm not leaving without engaging you, Mr. Wolfe. He flicked 2 fingers in a gesture that could have meant engagement, dismissal, or an itch. I escorted her to the front room with a chair and some decency while Fritz set the dining room for battle. When the bell went a second time, it was for us. We took our stations, Wolfe facing the window, me to his left, Mrs. Armitage opposite me like an auditor invited by the gods. Fritz served, and the universe took a step back to admire him. Wolfe ate, which means he concentrated on the food as if all other matters were side streets. Conversation during lunch at our place is like conversation with a safe. Possible, but you won't get much unless you know where to turn. Mrs. Armitage tried once, "Mr. Wolfe, do you think?" and learned the rule by the way his fork paused without lifting. She did not try again. After coffee, which restores Wolfe's faith in humanity more than any sermon, we returned to the office. She stayed on the red chair. Wolfe took his, settled, and folded his hands, which for him is like drawing a curtain before a play. "You came," he said, "not because you fear sabotage, but because you fear ridicule. The blogger's insinuation can be parried with competence and time. You have both. The public doesn't care whether Nero Wolfe eats your cassoulet, but the people who care what the public cares about do. If it is known that your dish to me arrives cold, that will be paraded as proof that your kitchen is an assembly of amateurs. So, you want me to find who is meddling, and you want me to do it without advertising that you ever concerned yourself with my appetite?" She nodded. "Yes, and," he added, "you want me specifically, because whoever is meddling either moves in your circle or mine, and in either case they will not come closer to you than your own dining room. They will come here." She blinked. "Why would they come here?" "Because I shall require them to," he said. I watched her absorb that. If you've never seen someone reconcile herself to the fact that a man who hasn't left his chair since Roosevelt was fresh is going to rearrange her life from it, it's a show. "I'll pay your fee," she said. "You will," he agreed. "My terms are usual. Mr. Goodwin will give you a memorandum. There are conditions." He held up a finger that would have suited a Roman statue. "First, the arrangement of weekly delivery to me will continue unchanged until I say otherwise. Second, you will say nothing to anyone about your visit here. Third, I will choose which of your people I speak to and where. And fourth?" I asked, because it's always good to give him room to be imperial. "Fourth," Wolfe said, "Mr. Goodwin will watch the kitchen of the Rialto this evening from an appropriate vantage. He will not be seen." Mrs. Armitage looked at me as if measuring how much trouble I would be to a kitchen already full of it. "That can be arranged. There's a small office with a window on the line. You can observe without interfering." "You will not arrange it," Wolfe said. "You will give Mr. Goodwin a floor plan and a list of access points. He will arrange it." She nodded, then stood. "I appreciate your time. I appreciate—" She paused. "No, I don't appreciate this. I need it." "That's better." Wolfe's mouth twitched, which is his version of applause. "You have sense." As she turned to go, I remembered something prickly. "You," said the in-house twin, stayed hot. "How do you know?" "I tasted it," she said. "Alone?" "With Tarek and Ava, and the wine rep who happened to be there." "Name?" "Rory Bell. He hustles for a Burgundy importer and thinks the sun sets in a bottle he's holding." "Everyone tasted the twin," I said, "and no one fainted, sued, or sang." I tapped the container, still chilling in our icebox's neighborhood. "And this one arrived cold." She looked at the bag, then at me, then at Wolfe. "Do you think I'm lying?" Wolfe sighed. "Madam, when I think you are lying, I will say so, and you will not have to ask." He gestured. "That will be all for now." She left with the sort of dignity you keep in a top drawer and only take out when company comes. I took the cassoulet to the kitchen and found Fritz polishing a resentment to a high shine. "Cold," he said, not looking at me. "Cold," I agreed. "Wolfe has opinions. He wants me to watch a kitchen tonight." "Then you will wear black," Fritz announced and snatched the container from me like a man yanking a child out of traffic. "I will test it." "You don't have to punish yourself," I told him. His eyebrows executed a maneuver that suggested I leave him alone or risk becoming a garnish. I did and returned to the office. Wolfe was drawing slow circles on his blotter with a pencil, a rare sight. He treats paper like a monk treats scripture. I sat. "You knew the Rialto was sending you lunch," I said. "I knew," he admitted. "Fritz knew. You did not need to. Is there a fifth condition where you tell me why your name is on a secret delivery slip?" "No." I stretched my legs and leaned back. "Then I'll guess. You've been testing a variable in cassoulet. Bean provenance, the ratio of fat to fable, the manner of crusting. You used the Rialto as a control or a foil." He closed his eyes again. When he opened them, I got the satisfaction of seeing I'd landed somewhere near the target. "You recall," he said, "Mr. Parker's piece 3 months ago that disparaged the current obsession with temperature as a substitute for flavor. I recall you calling him a man who thinks a chorus line is the same as a chorus." I was curious whether restaurants of standing were altering their methods to placate that chatter. The Rialto was an admirable subject. I informed them of certain standards and asked that one duplicate of their dish, prepared identically with the houses, be sent to me weekly. The purpose was comparison. That it should arrive cold makes the comparison absurd. "So we're not only rescuing a reputation," I said. "We're defending science." "Do not be facetious," he told me. "We are defending accuracy." He pressed a button. Beer arrived, and this time he drank it. "Archie," he said, "examine the delivery bag for tampering. Note the sealing method. Then go to Mr. Armitage's club and acquaint yourself with the kitchen and its inhabitants. Do not be a nuisance until you have to." "I'm always a nuisance," I said. "It saves time later." He lifted a hand. "One more thing. You will speak to Mr. Cates. He is a man who believes fame is an invention that should never say no to him. Such men touch everything they see." "And Evan Armitage?" "Later," Wolfe said. "He's not a man who arrives early." I stood. "What's your private reason for taking this?" Wolfe looked at the ceiling, as if somewhere up there a patient god was hiding a smile. "The sanctity of my table," he said, "has been affronted." I grinned. "So it's personal." "It is," he said, and his voice had the softness he reserves for orchids and indictments. "Go." Fritz didn't say good night when I left, which was his version of slamming a door. The cassoulet, sealed and under analysis, had the kitchen feeling like a lab where emotions weren't allowed. Wolfe had already withdrawn to the plant rooms upstairs, where orchids bloom and human patience dies of boredom. He never says good luck when I head out. Luck is a resource he doesn't believe in. He believes in cause and effect, preferably caused by me. The Rialto Club sat on 47th, tucked between a theatre that never recovered from the last flop and a jewelry shop pretending to be Paris. The awning was discreet, the kind that whispers, "Members only," without needing the sign. Inside, the maitre d' greeted me with the sort of suspicion usually reserved for men with subpoenas. I dropped Mrs. Armitage's name, and the temperature rose a few degrees. He guided me toward a glass door at the back that looked onto the kitchen. The kitchen itself was a busy geometry of steel and steam. A man with a trimmed beard and Mediterranean eyes barked orders that made sense only if you'd been born with a ladle in your hand. Tarek, the chef de cuisine. Beside him moved a younger woman, blonde ponytail, fast and quiet. Ava, the sous chef. Milo, the runner, was a wiry kid of 20 with more elbows than sense. He was packing something into insulated carriers, which I suspected were the twin cassoulets. Mrs. Armitage appeared from a side door wearing a practical dress and a look that suggested she'd skipped dinner. "Mr. Goodwin, I thought you'd prefer to see rather than hear. I like my facts the same way I like my steak, without garnish." She gave a small smile and nodded toward the corner office, a cramped glass box overlooking the line. "You can watch from there. Don't interfere. Tarek's temper travels faster than steam." The office smelled of wine corks and ambition. I perched on a stool and watched the performance. Tarek moved like a man in a duel with the clock, Ava anticipating his next word. Milo danced between stations, sealing containers, wiping sweat, checking addresses. Every step was clean and quick. I watched the cassoulet. Twins emerged from the oven, bubbling and fragrant. Tarek ladled them into 2 matching crocks, sealed both with parchment, twine, and a metal lid. Ava tagged them, 1 house, 1 W. Then they were boxed. I timed it. 2 minutes difference, no detours. When Milo finally left through the back door with the delivery bag, I followed at a distance, sticking to the shadows. He pedaled a delivery bike that looked like it had fought too many winters. The traffic was cooperative for once, and the route straight. No stops, no suspicious handoffs, no sabotage unless Manhattan's air had turned cold enough to curse soup. Yet when he reached the brownstone 35 minutes later and handed the package to our stoop boy, I took the temperature with my hand. Tepid. That kind of cold wasn't natural. Something in the chain was draining the heat deliberately. I sent Milo on his way with a smile that didn't promise friendship and carried the container inside. Fritz intercepted me before I hit the kitchen. Mr. Wolfe says bring it to him. In the office, Wolfe had a book open. Something French, naturally. He eyed the container, then me. Observed? Everything but their dreams. No tampering, no stops. Started hot, arrived lukewarm. He shut the book. Therefore, the interference is not external. That's comforting. Someone sabotaging it from the inside out, like a spy novel with beans. He ignored the humor. Describe the ceiling. I did. He nodded slowly. The parchment, that is your vector. I frowned. Paper doesn't make soup cold. Not unless it hides something. He tapped the desk. A veneer treated to accelerate cooling, perhaps metallic or absorbent. Mr. Parker's circle includes chemists who experiment with such illusions for presentation. But it is premature. Tomorrow you will speak with Mr. Cates. He will preen and he will lie. Detect the difference. I leaned against the desk. And Evan Armitage. He will come, Wolfe murmured. Men who lose wives to restaurants and reputations always do. The phone rang before I could answer. I picked it up, a woman's voice, tense, rushed. Is this Mr. Goodwin? It's Ava Linton from the Rialto. Tell Mr. Wolfe not to contact Tarek tonight. He's gone. Gone? He walked out after service. Left his knives, his jacket, everything, and someone broke into the wine cellar. That was enough to wipe the smug off the evening. I relayed it to Wolfe. He grunted once, the kind that meant things had shifted from irritation to intrigue. Very well, he said softly. Now the dish is cold, the chef is missing, and our client is no longer the only one being served deceit. We proceed. I was back at the Rialto before sunrise, which was an insult to both my circadian rhythm and the Manhattan air. The place was shuttered, the alley empty except for a garbage truck dragging its morning hangover. Inside, a side door showed, fresh pry marks, thin, efficient, and resentful. Whoever broke in hadn't wasted time. I slipped through, flashlight in hand, and let my instincts do the driving. The kitchen was clean. Too clean. Kitchens sleep messy. This one looked like it had been scolded into order. The wine cellar door, on the other hand, was sulking open. I stepped down, caught the scent of cork and betrayal, and spotted the broken lock on a rack of mid-tier Burgundies. A few bottles missing. Not random, expensive enough to sting, but not enough to bankrupt. That kind of theft meant message, not money. I heard footsteps on the stair behind me and turned, ready for either trouble or conversation. It was Ava, in jeans and a sweater, eyes swollen from lack of sleep. "I didn't expect you this early," she said. Neither did I. Habit of bad cases. I shone the light toward the shelves. What's missing? 4 bottles of Domaine Les Oiseaux, 2012. Our best Burgundy. Mr. Bell, our wine rep, supplied them personally. He'll howl. Did he have keys? She hesitated. No. Only I and Tarek had them. Tarek, who's vanished like smoke with a grudge. He didn't have a grudge, she said sharply, then caught herself. Sorry, it's just, he wouldn't do this. Not for money, not for show. He loved this place. Mrs. Armitage treated him like a son. Some sons bite the hand, I said, especially if the hand gets too generous. She rubbed her temple. He wasn't like that. Last night he was anxious. He kept checking his phone between orders. Then he went to the back alley for a call and never came back. Who did he talk to? I don't know, but I found this. She pulled out a folded slip of parchment, the same kind used to seal the cassoulet. It had faint discoloration near the edge, like oil or powder residue. I took it with my handkerchief and pocketed it. This goes to Wolfe. He likes his clues seasoned. Ava looked around as if the walls could hear. Mr. Goodwin, whoever did this isn't just after bad press. They want us to close, to ruin Lydia. Why? She met my eyes. Because the Rialto isn't just a restaurant. It's leverage. Her ex-husband still owns a silent share through a dummy investor. If it collapses, he buys the ruins for pennies and rebuilds under his name. That put a few more chairs at the table. And this investor, any name attached? She nodded. Rory Bell. I let that sink in. The wine rep who brought the missing bottles, tasted the twin cassoulet, and probably smiled through it all. If Wolfe were here, he'd already have the man sweating under grammar alone. But Wolfe doesn't leave his chair, so I'd have to do the sweating part. By noon, I was at Bell's tasting room downtown, where wine was treated like royalty and conversation like currency. He was tall, smooth, and polished enough to make a mirror jealous. Archie Goodwin, he greeted, hand extended, voice a warm advertisement. You're Wolfe's men. Is this about the cassoulet scandal I keep hearing whispers of? Whispers travel fast for someone who sells wine, Mr. Bell. I sell information, too, about tannins and trends. He poured himself a glass from an open bottle, didn't offer me any. If you're here about Tarek, I'm as surprised as anyone. Brilliant chef, temper like Cayenne, but loyal. Too loyal. Meaning? He smiled over the rim. Loyal to the wrong people. Lydia Armitage, for instance. That woman attracts obsession like moths to butter. Maybe her ex finally got tired of paying alimony while she fed another man's ego. I watched him sip. You're remarkably informed for someone on the sidelines. I keep clients close, and I don't enjoy being accused of theft over a few missing bottles. I didn't say you were accused, I said. Just that the wine missing from the Rialto has your fingerprints all over it. Figuratively, maybe literally. You tasted the dish, handled the packaging, and knew the timing of delivery. If someone wanted to slip something into parchment, you were there. His smile froze just enough to show the edges. You're barking up a dry vine, Mr. Goodwin. I supply quality, not sabotage. Maybe both, I said lightly, heading for the door. Tell me, when's the last time you saw Evan Armitage? He laughed, but it didn't travel far. At the club, 2 nights ago. He's been sniffing around again. You can ask Lydia about that. She'll make it sound romantic. Outside, the city had warmed just enough to make me wish it hadn't. I called Wolfe from a payphone down the block. He answered on the 3rd ring. Well, your parchment was in Tarek's station. Bell's sitting on more knowledge than a priest, and the ex-husband's name keeps floating like scum on soup. Wolfe grunted. Bring the parchment. Fritz will have the microscope ready, and tell Mrs. Armitage to prepare for guests this evening. We must confront a thief before he decides to add murder to the menu. By the time I got back to the brownstone, the sky was half slate, half surrender. Fritz met me at the door with his usual hospitality and a microscope. which for him meant that science had trespassed into his kitchen and was unwelcome company. I carried the folded parchment into the office, where Wolfe sat immovable as law itself, fingers tented, eyes shut. If I hadn't known him better, I'd have thought he was asleep. He wasn't. The second I stepped inside, his voice came out steady as the clock. The parchment. I handed it over. He lifted it with the care of a man holding a relic, sniffed once and passed it to Fritz, who muttered in Swiss German and took it to the desk by the window, where the microscope was waiting. For the next few minutes, the only sounds were the soft scrape of glass and the city humming through double-paned quiet. Wolfe broke, at first. "Your impressions of Mr. Bell?" "Too smooth," I said. "The kind of man who uses charm like a corkscrew. He knew more than he was asked and acted like that was natural. And if I had to bet, he's connected to the ex-husband, Evan Armitage. Maybe financially, maybe socially. They breathe the same air." "Indeed." Wolfe took a sip of beer that had been waiting, as patient as he was. "And Tarek? Still missing. Ava thinks he didn't run. Someone made sure he wouldn't come back. The kitchen's clean as confession, except for a few empty wine racks and the parchment she found. Whoever broke in was tidy and practiced." "Then the burglary was camouflage?" "That's what I thought. Too neat for real theft." Before Wolfe could respond, Fritz turned from the microscope, frowning like a man discovering a moral flaw in a soufflé. "There's residue," he said. "Metallic, thin, almost invisible. Possibly aluminum dust mixed with something oily." Wolfe nodded. "Conductive. A treatment applied to the parchment, designed to absorb and distribute heat rapidly. Ingenious. It would cool the dish by conduction once sealed." I whistled. "So our saboteur didn't just ruin lunch. He engineered it." "Precisely," Wolfe said. "A trivial insult executed with sophistication, which means the motive is personal, not professional. The question is whose pride demanded such artistry." I leaned on the desk. Kate, the rival chef, could manage the chemistry. Those experimental kitchens love gadgets, but Bell has the connections, and Evan Armitage has the grudge. "Each capable in his own way," Wolfe murmured. "But which of them could enlist the other two?" Before I could answer, the phone rang. I picked it up. Lydia Armitage's voice came sharp and low. "Mr. Goodwin, please tell Mr. Wolfe he was right. Evan's here. He came to the club an hour ago, drunk and smiling. He says he wants to make peace." "Peace with what?" "With me. And the kitchen. He's asking to taste the cassoulet." "The same one." I covered the receiver. "Evan's at the Rialto, asking for seconds." Wolfe's eyes opened, dark and exact. "Tell her to detain him without confrontation. We will come to him, metaphorically." I relayed the order. She hesitated, then said, "He's in the dining room. If he gets any louder, I won't have to detain him. The staff will." When I hung up, Wolfe was already issuing directions. "Bring Mr. Bell here this evening at 7. Mrs. Armitage, her sous chef, and, if he can be found, Tarek as well. You will ensure Evan Armitage receives the invitation by proxy. Say only that I intend to discuss restitution. You expect him to show. Men who think they've won are most eager to attend the post-mortem." I smiled. "And if Tarek's still missing, then we will find him, or his absence will speak." At 6:30, the brownstone was set for siege. Fritz had retreated to the kitchen, muttering about the desecration of ovens, and Wolfe had the office polished like an interrogation room for angels. When the doorbell rang, I opened it to find Bell first, impeccable, perfumed, and trying too hard to look unconcerned. Behind him came Lydia, dignified and taut as a wire, with Ava following close, pale and wary. Evan Armitage brought up the rear, flushed with drink and triumph. Wolfe greeted them with a nod that could have frozen a handshake. "Thank you for coming. Sit." They sat, or rather, Lydia and Ava did. Bell took the red chair like a man auditioning for grace. Evans sprawled on the couch, laughing under his breath. Wolfe waited until silence filled the corners, then said softly, "You are here because a dish went cold. But food, like honor, seldom spoils alone. Someone intended not only to humiliate a restaurant, but to wound me. In this house, such effrontery is intolerable." Evans smirked. "You talk like a priest over soup." Wolfe didn't even look at him. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, "fetch the parchment." I did, setting it on his desk like an exhibit. He gestured to it. This was treated with a metallic compound. Ingenious, delicate, and ruinous. Only someone with access to the packaging could apply it, and with knowledge of its effect. A chef might not risk it. A rival might. But a financier with both to gain and to hide, he would. Bell stiffened. Lydia turned to him, shock breaking her composure. Wolfe's voice went on, calm and merciless. "Mr. Bell, you sabotaged the dish to discredit the Rialto, lowering its value so your partner, Evan Armitage, could acquire it cheaply. You then staged a theft to deflect suspicion and silence Tarek, who discovered the tampering." Evan surged forward. "That's insane." Wolfe lifted a hand. "You may spare us the theatrics. Mr. Goodwin, bring in our guest." The front door opened, and Saul Panzer stepped in with Tarek behind him, tired, shaken, but alive. His presence cut through the room like a wire. "I told you," Wolfe murmured, eyes glinting. "The dish may have gone cold, but the trail never does." Tarek's entrance didn't make noise. It made atmosphere. He stood just inside the threshold. Pale, eyes hollow but alive, the kind of man who'd seen enough in a night to consider silence a gift. Saul gave me a nod, the quiet, precise kind that meant the job was done cleanly, and took his usual post by the door. Wolfe inclined his head, no more acknowledgement than he would have given the turning of a page, but enough to signal the curtain had lifted on the next act. "Mr. Tarek," Wolfe said, "you were absent when you were expected, and present now when you are not. Explain." Tarek swallowed hard. "I didn't run. Someone told me to leave. Said if I came back, I'd regret it." His voice trembled, more from exhaustion than fear. "They called me from a number I didn't know. They said the police would be next if I stayed. I thought, Mrs. Armitage, I thought I was protecting you." Lydia's hands tightened on her lap. "Protecting me from what?" "From ruin," Tarek said. "They said there'd be an article about falsified wine imports, tax fraud, health violations, all lies, but believable enough. They said it would destroy the Rialto unless I kept quiet about the parchment." I caught Wolfe's glance. It was a small flicker, but in Wolfe terms, that's a drum roll. "Who told you this?" he asked. Tarek hesitated, eyes darting to Bell, then to Evan. It was Mr. Bell's voice. I'd know it anywhere. Bell laughed, a shade too sharp. "You're mad. Why would I call you? Why would I threaten anyone? I sell wine, not gossip." "You sell more than that," Wolfe said, voice calm as water over stone. "You sell leverage. You make your clients dependent on your palate, your approval, and your silence. A restaurateur with a secret becomes a customer for life. Mrs. Armitage refused your proposition of exclusive supply last month, did she not?" Lydia nodded slowly, realization dawning. "You said it was bad for business to buy directly from the vineyard." "Indeed," Wolfe continued. "And when she declined, you sought another way to profit. You arranged with her former husband, who was eager to reclaim the Rialto, that a small scandal would suffice to drive down its reputation. He would buy it. You would restore it, and both would feed from the carcass." Evan slammed his hand on the arm of the couch. "That's nonsense." "Lydia, you can't believe this. He's twisting it." But Wolfe didn't even shift his gaze. "Mr. Panzer," he said, "please produce the object you retrieved from Mr. Bell's office." Saul reached into his coat and drew out a slim envelope, sealed in evidence paper. He handed it to me, and I passed it to Wolfe. Wolfe slid a gloved finger under the flap and drew out several folded invoices. Imported metal powders, labeled as culinary silver dust, purchased under your name, Mr. Bell. Same supplier used by experimental kitchens for thermal plating. Bell's face drained color. That doesn't prove anything. On the contrary, Wolfe said, it proves everything. The parchment from the Rialto was treated with the same compound. It carries the identical chemical signature. Aluminum bonded with olive oil emulsifier. You used it to cool the cassoulet in transit, to create the illusion of incompetence, and you involved Mr. Armitage, who lent his access and his arrogance. Evan was on his feet now, red-faced, fists clenched. You can't prove I touched anything. You can't. Sit down, Wolfe said mildly. And Evan did, as if gravity had suddenly remembered him. You gave Mr. Bell the names of your wife's staff. You informed him of the delivery schedule. You arranged for the distraction, the theft of the wine, to occupy the kitchen while the sabotage took place. You believed it would leave no trace but embarrassment. Lydia's voice cut in, low and steady. And Tarek was the witness. Yes, Wolfe said. He saw the tampering. Mr. Bell, realizing the risk, called him, threatened him, and counted on fear to finish the work. It did not occur to him that fear is temporary, but guilt is not. Bell opened his mouth, closed it, then looked at Evan. You said no one would notice. That was all it took. Lydia turned her head sharply, a gasp escaping her. Wolfe sighed softly, like a man hearing a false note in a symphony. Confession, he said, the cheapest proof. Mr. Goodwin, please telephone Inspector Kramer. Tell him we have 2 men for his attention, one for conspiracy, one for fraud. While I made the call, the room held still except for the faint scrape of Wolfe's chair as he leaned back, hands folded again, calm restored. When I hung up, I caught Lydia's eye. She was pale, but upright. Tarek sat beside her, shoulders slack, relief trembling through him. Bell stared into the middle distance like a man tasting the vinegar of his own choices. Evan muttered something about lawyers, but no one answered. Wolfe broke the silence at last. Mrs. Armitage, I regret that your establishment became a battlefield, but it will recover. The story will not harm you if told correctly. Mr. Goodwin will see to that. She rose, composed despite everything. Mr. Wolfe, she said softly, you've done more than I asked. Thank you. He inclined his head. Madame, you repaired the damage by trusting me. I merely ensured accuracy. As she and Tarek left with Saul escorting them, Wolfe reached for his beer, raised it slightly toward me, and said, Archie, the world is full of men who think cunning substitutes for character. They forget that even deceit, when executed without art, leaves fingerprints. I grinned. And you, of course, collect them. He closed his eyes, content. I do. And now, dinner. The clatter of the front door closing behind Lydia and Tarek left a silence you could have buttered. Saul's steady tread followed them out, and then the house settled back into its usual temperature. Civilized, faintly smug, and full of the kind of quiet that lets you hear your own pulse. Wolfe didn't move, just sat there with his fingers still steepled, eyes shut, the faintest frown like a leftover note from an unfinished tune. I knew that look. It meant the case was solved, but not done. Something's still buzzing in your attic, I said. He opened one eye, slowly, like a bear checking to see if winter was worth leaving. A residue of dissatisfaction, he said. The essential work is complete, but its symmetry is flawed. I dislike asymmetry. You mean Bell's confession? That was inevitable, he said. His intellect was adequate, his imagination deficient. No, the flaw lies elsewhere. He motioned toward the desk, and I gathered the papers from the case file. The invoices, Tarek's statement, the chemical report Fritz had typed up under protest. Wolfe didn't touch them. He just stared as if they might rearrange themselves into better order if he waited long enough. I leaned back. Kramer's on his way. I told him you've got 2 live ones cooling their heels. He said he'd bring the wagon. He may bring a wagon and a mule, Wolfe muttered. It will not alter the fact that Mr. Armitage was only a catalyst, not a cause. Meaning he didn't cook up the idea. Precisely. He lacks the cunning. The plan required precision, not passion. It began elsewhere. That sounded like trouble circling back, which is a thing trouble does well. You're saying Bell wasn't the top of the pyramid? Wolfe's eyes opened fully now, alert. He was the craftsman, not the architect. Before I could ask who else he wanted to add to the dinner guest list, the bell rang again. Fritz appeared, looking like a man who'd just been informed that dessert had been postponed. "Inspector Kramer," he said, grim as a telegram. Kramer came in without waiting for an invitation. His coat looked like it had survived an argument with the wind, and his cigar was already lit. "All right, Wolfe. What's the parade this time?" "2 conspirators," Wolfe said. "One foolish, one greedy. Both yours." Kramer grunted. Yeah. My men already have them in the car. Bell's singing scales, and Armitage keeps saying he was tricked. You've got your fingerprints all over it. Figuratively, I hope." Wolfe waved a hand. "Their guilt is self-evident. What concerns me now is who suggested the method." "Suggested?" Kramer bit down on his cigar. "You're saying there's someone else?" "I'm saying," Wolfe replied evenly, "that neither Bell nor Armitage possessed the technical imagination to invent a thermal sabotage through treated parchment. That idea came from someone versed in culinary experimentation and eager to disgrace a rival. I believe that man to be Julian Cates." Kramer's head jerked up. "The blogger? The one who wrote that piece about the death of heat in cuisine?" "The same," Wolfe said. His article 3 weeks ago derided the obsession with temperature as archaic theater. It was, in fact, a declaration of intent. He sought to prove his thesis by demonstration, public and cruel. Kramer swore softly. "You're saying the guy who complains about cold food made it cold on purpose." "Paradox is the luxury of fools," Wolfe said. "He found in the Rialto's prestige an ideal target. The delivery to me was a stage. The sabotage, a performance. Bell and Armitage were his instruments." Kramer shook his head. "You don't have proof, just logic, and logic doesn't hold up in court." Wolfe smiled faintly. "No, but evidence will. Mr. Goodwin, retrieve the note. From the Rialto's kitchen drawer, the one Mrs. Armitage said accompanied the first cold cassoulet." I did, pulling it from the case file. It was a printed card, typed in block font. "Temperature is the tyranny of the timid." Wolfe pointed at the sentence. A phrase lifted verbatim from Kate's article. Mr. Bell wouldn't risk quoting another man's words unless instructed to. Vanity prefers its own vocabulary. Kramer studied it, jaw working. "You've got a point, damn it. All right, I'll pick him up and shake the tree. If he drops something, I'll send you the seeds." "Please don't," Wolfe said. "My garden thrives without contamination." When Kramer left, trailing smoke and paperwork, the air relaxed again. I poured Wolfe his evening beer and waited. "So Cates planned the play, Bell built the stage, and Armitage sold the tickets," I said. "Nice arrangement." He nodded, slow and satisfied now that his symmetry had been restored. "Evil, like art, requires composition." "Yeah," I said, leaning back in my chair, "but it still ends up framed." He gave a small grunt that might have been approval, then looked toward the dining room. "Fritz," he called, "we may dine now. The world is once again edible." And that's how it ended, with Fritz serving roast duck and Wolfe reclaiming the sanctity of his table as if betrayal could be scrubbed off with sauce espagnole. Me? I just sat there, watching him eat, thinking how many crimes start in kitchens. How pride and appetite mix worse than oil and vinegar. Wolfe didn't speak again until dessert. "Archie," he said finally, eyes half closed with satisfaction, "there is a moral to this." "Sure," I said. "Don't tamper with a man's lunch." He gave me the ghost of a smile. "Almost. The moral, my dear Goodwin, is that the only dish which truly goes cold is conscience." Dinner that night was quieter than most, but that didn't make it peaceful. The kind of quiet Wolfe cultivates isn't absence. It's pressure. You can almost hear his thoughts filing themselves into order, like soldiers lining up for inspection. Fritz cleared the table with reverent efficiency, leaving behind the faint aroma of roast and judgment. Wolfe finished his coffee, wiped his lips, and leaned back in the chair that had borne more verdicts than any courtroom in the city. "You're uncharacteristically silent," he said, without looking at me. "I'm digesting," I said. "Food, and also the fact that we just put 3 people out of business and into the headlines before dessert. I'm pacing myself." He closed his eyes briefly. "Morbid reflection is a waste of energy. The guilty suffer the consequences of their incompetence." "Sure," I said, "but it's not every day a man tanks a rival's restaurant for philosophy. Cates wanted to make a point about temperature, Bell wanted a profit, and Evan wanted a divorce settlement that came with bragging rights. They each got what they deserved, but I still don't know which one of them is going to haunt your mail first." He didn't respond. The faint hum of the city filtered through the curtains, the sound of a world that didn't care who was guilty so long as the food stayed warm. I leaned back, balancing my chair on 2 legs, and said, "You're still thinking about symmetry." He opened one eye. "I am. You said earlier the work was complete. I take it that was a lie." "It was an optimism," he said, "which I should have known better than to indulge. Inspector Kramer's call a moment ago confirmed it." That made me straighten up. "Kramer called? When?" "While you were assisting Fritz in the kitchen, which is a sentence I hope never to repeat." "What did he say?" "That Julian Cates denies all involvement, which was to be expected. But he also claims that his words, the phrase used in the note, were quoted without permission in another publication last month, a small culinary journal called The Modern Palate. If true, it dilutes the certainty of authorship." I let out a low whistle. "Meaning we can't prove he wrote the note, even if the phrase was lifted from him?" "Precisely. Then the neat bow you tied around this case just came loose." "Not quite. It frayed," Wolfe said, "and I detest frayed things." He reached for the case file, tapped a finger on the parchment sample. "Someone imitated Mr. Cates' words and method, but the imitation was not perfect. The treatment used on the parchment was too crude to have come from a laboratory. It was mixed by hand, which suggests an amateur, not a culinary experimentalist." "That narrows it down," I said dryly. "To anyone with 2 hands and an agenda." "Not anyone," he said. "Someone who wanted Cates implicated but lacked his skill. A fraud pretending to be a philosopher, a chef perhaps, who felt overlooked." "Tarek?" Wolfe's expression didn't shift, but his eyes opened fully. "I entertained that possibility briefly, but his fear was genuine and his ignorance consistent. He is incapable of subterfuge. No, Mr. Goodwin, the deception lies closer to our client." That landed with the kind of weight that makes the room smaller. "Lydia Armitage," I said. He nodded once. Her motive was not revenge, but preservation. She feared losing the Rialto, to her husband, to critics, to time. By inviting me into her problem, she bought credibility. When the dish arrived cold, she could claim victimhood. A narrative of persecution gained sympathy and business. I stared at him. "You're saying she staged the sabotage? That she played both sides?" "Not alone," Wolfe said. "She engaged Bell to execute it, intending only embarrassment, not conspiracy. But Bell's greed and Armitage's spite transformed it into something worse. The artifice escaped her control. That's speculation, I said. It is inference, he corrected, and it will remain so unless we compel her to confess. But we shall not do that. Why not? Because justice is already served, however imperfectly. To expose her now would destroy an institution that, though flawed, employs a dozen honest people. It would also gratify no one but the press. I studied him. You're letting her go because of ethics? He almost smiled. Because of appetite, a great restaurant, like a great man, may be corrupt, but still essential. The phone rang again. I picked it up, half expecting Kramer's growl, but it was Lydia's voice. Steady, polite, too controlled. Mr. Goodwin, please thank Mr. Wolfe. I've just been informed that the police found Kate's fingerprints on one of the wine bottles. They're saying the matter's closed. I wanted him to know I'm relieved. I looked at Wolfe. He raised an eyebrow. Tell her, he said softly, that closure is an illusion enjoyed only by the naive. I relayed it more gently. She didn't answer at first. Then, tell him thank you anyway. The line clicked dead. When I hung up, Wolfe was staring into his beer as though divining its surface. She will survive, he said at last. The Rialto will recover. Kate's will stew in public disgrace, all balance restored. On paper. And off paper. He sighed. Off paper, nothing ever truly cools. The world simply learns to eat it cold. That, coming from Wolfe, was practically poetry. He leaned back, reached for another bottle, and said, Archie, bring the evening paper. I wish to see what foolish conclusions the journalists have cooked from our efforts. I handed it to him, and as he began to read, the brownstone settled again into its timeless calm. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint clink of glass, and the city beyond our walls, still hungry for drama. The case was over, maybe, but I knew Wolfe well enough to know he'd be chewing on it until the flavor turned bitter. And me? I just hoped tomorrow's lunch stayed hot. The next morning began with rain, thin, persistent, and disapproving, like the city itself had read the papers and wasn't impressed. The headlines were predictable. Culinary saboteur exposed in bizarre restaurant plot. Kramer had done his usual job of feeding the press just enough facts to make the public feel informed while keeping Wolfe's name out of the print. That was good for Wolfe, bad for my ego. I like credit as much as the next man, provided it comes with coffee. When I entered the office, Wolfe was already there, though already for him means the orchids had been satisfied, the morning beer consumed, and the day officially begun. He was reading, which always looked less like reading and more like disassembling a text molecule by molecule to see if it deserved to exist. You've made the news again, I said, tossing the paper onto his desk. I did not, he replied, without lifting his eyes. I abhor participation in sensationalism. The police made the news. We merely restored equilibrium. That's one way to call it. Another way is to say you caught 3 crooks before lunch and caused a city-wide shortage of cassoulet. He ignored that. Has Mrs. Armitage telephoned? Not yet. My bet is she's still busy doing PR damage control, telling people the cassoulet was a metaphor and not a scandal. Pity, Wolfe murmured. She was capable, though dangerously self-aware. That sort of intelligence inevitably turns inward. I poured myself coffee and leaned against the filing cabinet. Speaking of inward turns, you've been staring at the same page for 15 minutes. What's still itching? He folded the newspaper, set it aside, and fixed me with that heavy-lidded stare that could have curdled cream. The timing? Of what? The final delivery? Consider, Bell and Armitage were exposed, yet the cassoulet that evening still arrived precisely on time, untouched. That implies someone else in the chain knew to maintain the illusion. Maybe Milo, I suggested. The delivery boy. He just did his job. Precisely, Wolfe said. too well. His route remained perfect, despite upheaval, investigation, and arrest at his employer's door. That consistency is suspicious. I frowned. You think the kid's part of it? Not consciously, but perhaps instrumentally. He pushed himself back slightly, eyes distant. The human mind is a poor custodian of routine. It falters when the world collapses around it. Yet this boy executed his task with machine precision under extraordinary stress. Someone instructed him, reinforced his obedience. Someone like Mrs. Armitage? Or someone closer, Wolfe said. Someone whose loyalty is mechanical, whose interest lies not in profit or revenge, but in performance. The invisible agent, the one who ensures that the machine runs, even when its masters fall apart. I caught his drift. You're talking about Ava, the sous chef. He inclined his head slightly. She is efficient to the point of sterility, and she remained conspicuously silent during the confrontation here. Fear disguises itself in noise, obedience in quiet. You think she knew about the sabotage and kept it running? I think she understood it, he said, and in understanding, she perpetuated it. The phone rang. Fritz appeared at the door, face tight. For Mr. Goodwin, he said. A woman. I picked up. It was Ava. Her voice was calm, too calm. Mr. Goodwin, you told me once you liked seeing things for yourself. You might want to come to the Rialto now. What's happened? Mrs. Armitage. She collapsed in the kitchen. The doctor says it's poison. The line went dead. Wolfe had been listening, of course. He doesn't eavesdrop. He anticipates. When I met his eyes, they were already dark with calculation. Go, he said, and observe everything. The poison, the people, the atmosphere. If Mrs. Armitage dies, the pattern will change, and patterns are my concern. I didn't argue. 30 minutes later, I was back at the Rialto, where the front door stood open and the air smelled of panic. 2 uniforms hovered by the bar, and a doctor in shirt sleeves bent over Lydia on a table hastily cleared for the purpose. She was pale, lips bluish, breathing shallow. Ava stood nearby, motionless, eyes unreadable. What happened? I asked. She was tasting a sauce, the doctor said. Collapsed immediately after swallowing. We're stabilizing her. Tasting whose sauce? Ava didn't blink. Mine. That hung in the air like bad smoke. You cooked it? I asked. Yes. She insisted on helping. I turned to get the herbs, and when I looked back, she was on the floor. The doctor motioned to an officer. We'll need the sample sent to the lab. I moved closer to Ava. You seem awfully calm. She looked at me then, and there was something fierce behind the stillness. I've been calm for weeks, Mr. Goodwin. Someone had to be. By the time I called Wolfe from the payphone across the street, the rain had turned heavy. He listened in silence as I gave the details. When I finished, he said only, "Return at once and bring the sauce." The police won't. They will if you exercise initiative. Tell them I request it for analysis. Kramer will consent. He always does when he wants answers. He was right, of course. Kramer grumbled but let me take a small sealed jar. By the time I made it back, Wolfe was already at the desk, glassware and reagents laid out like an alchemist preparing confession. He held the jar to the light, unscrewed the lid, and sniffed. His nostrils flared once. Not poison, he said quietly. Not chemical. Simpler, more human. What is it? He looked up. Despair, he said. But we'll confirm. There are truths even I prefer not to assume. And for the first time that day, I wasn't sure if he meant Lydia or himself. Wolfe handled the sauce like a priest with sacrament. He didn't taste it, he never does, but he let a drop slide onto a porcelain dish, spread it thin with a glass rod, and studied the color as if it were a confession. The air in the office went still except for the faint hum from the refrigerator down the hall. Fritz, hovering at the doorway, watched with a kind of horrified fascination usually reserved for public executions. After a minute, Wolfe spoke, his tone clipped and cold. "There is no poison." I was perched on the edge of my desk. "That's what you said before. What's your definition this time?" He dipped the rod again, held it to the light, and said, "The flavoring compound is harmless. Salt, onion, tarragon, and a trace of something sweet. But the proportions are grotesque. It was meant to revolt the palate, not the body. You're saying Lydia didn't get poisoned. She got disgusted." "Disgust is a chemical in its own right," he said. "But no, Mr. Goodwin. Mrs. Armitage fainted not from ingestion, but from knowledge. The taste confirmed what she already feared. That someone wanted her dead," he sighed. "That someone wanted her exposed." Before I could press him, the phone rang. Fritz picked it up and listened for a moment, then looked at Wolfe. "Inspector Kramer," he said, handing me the receiver. Kramer's voice came through tight and irritable. "Goodwin, tell your genius employer that Mrs. Armitage's collapse has the press sniffing for blood. The hospital says she's stable, but the doctor found traces of belladonna in her system. That's poison, in case you forgot your Latin." I glanced at Wolfe. "Belladonna. They say it's real this time." He frowned slightly. "Impossible. That's the official word." "Then the official word is wrong. The sauce contains nothing so crude." He turned his gaze back to me. "Where was Ava when Mrs. Armitage collapsed?" "Right there. She said Lydia was helping." "She allowed it," Wolfe said softly, "which means she anticipated it." "You think Ava doctored the food?" "I think Ava watched it happen. She's not the type to soil her own handiwork, but she might permit someone else to." I felt the first flicker of unease. "You think Lydia poisoned herself?" He didn't answer immediately. His fingers drummed once on the desk. Self-destruction is merely an extreme form of control. Mrs. Armitage's pride demanded that no one else determine her ruin. It would be consistent with her character to convert defeat into drama. "That's a hell of a way to save face," I said. "Not save," he corrected. "Preserve. Appearances, legacy, narrative. She could not bear to be pitied. Poison would turn her into the tragic heroine instead of the fallen restaurateur." "But the belladonna?" "Traces, Mr. Goodwin. A tincture, perhaps. Enough to suggest danger, not deliberate. She wanted to collapse in public, nothing more. But she underestimated the body's variability." The doorbell cut through the room. Fritz went to answer, and a minute later ushered in Kramer himself, raincoat dripping, cigar unlit but clenched. "I should have known you'd be brewing theories before breakfast," he said. "Mind if I sit?" Wolfe gestured. "If you must." Kramer dropped into the red chair, glared at the dish of sauce, and then at Wolfe. "We've got a mess. The lab says the poison came from a wine glass, not the food. That means someone slipped it to her after she tasted the sauce." "That's an improvement," Wolfe said dryly. "It narrows our field to a handful of suspects. Miss Ava, the doctor, or the officer who handled her afterward." "Or you," Kramer snapped. "You had that sample before anyone." Wolfe gave him a look that could have peeled varnish. "Inspector, if I intended to murder a client, I assure you I'd use a more imaginative method than table wine." I intervened before Kramer's temper reached its boil. "Inspector, Ava called me to the scene. She could have fled if she was guilty. Or called you to prove she wasn't," he grunted. "Either way, I've got her downtown answering questions." "Release her," Wolfe said abruptly. Kramer blinked. "The hell I will." "She's too disciplined to act without direction," Wolfe said. "Detaining her will yield nothing. The hand you want belongs to someone who profits from Mrs. Armitage's death, not her humiliation." Kramer puffed. "The ex-husband's in custody." "Not him," Wolfe murmured. "Someone subtler. Someone who gains both the restaurant and its redemption." I stared. "The investor. Bell's replacement." Precisely. The silent partner who appeared after the scandal broke. Wolfe leaned back, eyes half closed. The board of the Rialto will vote within days to restructure ownership. If Mrs. Armitage dies, her controlling shares revert not to her estate, but to the investor of record, filed last week under the name Ava Linton. Kramer froze. The sous chef. She doesn't have that kind of money. No, Wolfe said, voice soft as a knife sliding home. But she has the skills, the patience, and the perfect position. Belle, Armitage, and even Kate's, all useful distractions while she prepared her ascent. She brewed the chaos, then offered loyalty as cure. The ultimate dish served cold. Kramer rose slowly, eyes wide. You're sure? As sure as I am of appetite, Wolfe said. Fetch her, Inspector. She will not run far. She's waited too long to sit at the head of the table. Kramer left without another word. The door closed, and the house exhaled. Wolfe lifted his beer, inspected it, and finally drank. I watched him for a moment, then said, You know, if you ever wanted to open a restaurant, you'd have the decor down. Murder for entree, truth for dessert. He didn't smile. I already have one, he said. It's called civilization. It was past midnight when Kramer called back. I just convinced myself the day was over and was halfway through unbuttoning my shirt when the phone started its growl. Wolfe was still in the office, reading, which meant the phone was my duty and the sleep mine to lose. Goodwin, I said. Kramer, we got her. His voice was ragged with the satisfaction of work finished and paperwork pending. Picked her up at her apartment on 52nd. She didn't fight, just smiled and said, It's about time. You ever notice how the calm ones make the worst criminals? Regularly, I said. You planning to share the details or leave me with the trailer? She talked, he said. Said she didn't poison Mrs. Armitage. Didn't need to. Lydia was drinking herself to ruin, already. But Ava admitted to feeding the gossip, planting stories, keeping the place off balance so she'd step in as the savior. The wine, though, the belladonna that came from Lydia's own bottle. Ava just didn't stop her. I felt the chill of that settle in. And Lydia? Still breathing, he said. Maybe by morning we'll know if she keeps doing it. For now, your man was right. Again. He hung up before I could thank him, which was his way of keeping balance in the universe. I turned back to Wolfe, who hadn't looked up from his book. Ava's in custody. Lydia poisoned herself, accidentally or otherwise. You were right, as usual. I'm aware, he said. Kramer's tone carries through the walls. Sit down, Archie. I did. He closed the book and set it on the desk, fingers resting lightly on the cover. You recall what I said about symmetry. The case has achieved it, through decay. Every participant consumed by their own design. Belle by greed, Armitage by vanity, Kate's by folly, Ava by ambition, and Lydia by despair. It is almost mathematical. Almost, I said, except for one loose variable. You. Indeed, he said dryly. I am the constant. He stood, which he does only when an idea has matured enough to justify motion. He walked to the globe near the corner, spun it once with 2 fingers, and stopped it with his thumb over France. It was the cassoulet that began it, he said, half to himself. A dish of patience and precision corrupted by haste and pride. Fitting, is it not, that the final act should return to the kitchen? Sure, I said, if you like your morals cooked. He turned back to me. Morals are always cooked, Archie. Raw ones are indigestible. There was a pause. The rain outside had turned heavier, muffled against the glass. The city beyond our walls went about its business, untroubled by the small tragedies of those who thought themselves clever. Tomorrow, Wolfe said, you will visit the hospital. If Mrs. Armitage survives, convey to her my regret that she mistook performance for salvation, and retrieve my casserole dish from her establishment. I will not have it associated with melodrama. Yes, sir, I said, deadpan. He returned to his chair, eased into it like a man re-entering his natural element, and reached for his beer. "Fritz!" he called, and the answer came instantly from the hall, proving that Fritz always knew when Wolfe was ready to conclude a night. The tray appeared, gleaming silver, carrying one final sandwich, the kind that would never make it into a recipe book. Wolfe took it, examined it with solemn appreciation, and then glanced up at me. "Archie," he said, "what does this teach us? That people ruin good food faster than bad ideas?" "Not quite," he said, biting delicately. "That appetite, like ambition, must be governed or it devours its master. The dish that went cold was never the cassoulet. It was conscience." He chewed once, swallowed, and gave a small grunt of satisfaction. "Now," he said, "go to bed. There will be another fool by Thursday." So I did, leaving him there under the low lamp, the office smelling faintly of beer, spice, and finality. Outside, the rain kept falling, steady, precise, and unsentimental. Just the way Wolfe liked his justice. I went to the hospital the next morning, as instructed, wearing my least offensive tie and carrying the casserole dish like a relic that had survived the Crusades. The nurse at the front desk looked at it the way you'd look at a live grenade, but she pointed me toward room 214. Lydia Armitage was awake, pale as parchment, but very much alive. Her eyes tracked me when I walked in, and for a second I thought she was going to pretend she didn't know me. Then she smiled, a small, tired curve that didn't quite make it to her eyes. "Mr. Goodwin," she said, "you came to collect the evidence." "That, and to deliver a message," I said. "From Wolfe. He sends his regrets." Her brow lifted. "Regrets? That you mistook performance for salvation," I said. His words, not mine. She let out a faint laugh that ended in a cough. He's right, of course. I was trying to hold on to something that had already slipped away. The restaurant, the reputation. It's all theater, and I was trying to rewrite the script while it was burning. I set the casserole dish on the table beside her. For what it's worth, the food wasn't the only thing that cooled off. Her hand reached for the dish as if it meant something. "Do you think he believes I meant to die?" "I think he believes you meant to choose," I said. "And you did." She closed her eyes, and for once the fight left her. "Tell him thank you," she whispered. I did later back at the brownstone. Wolfe listened without interrupting, the way he does when he's tasting a result instead of a meal. When I finished, he sat back, eyes half-lidded. "She will live," he said finally. "For now," I said. "The restaurant's finished, though. The press is already using phrases like culinary tragedy and the poisoned plate. Kramer says Ava confessed to the setup. Said she wanted control, but not death." He nodded once. "Ambition devours itself. It's as reliable as gravity. Kramer says he's closing the case. He wanted me to tell you you're a menace to procedure and a blessing to justice." Wolfe's mouth twitched. Kramer's ambivalence sustains him. He would be lost without me. I poured myself coffee and leaned against the desk. "So that's it. The dish went cold, and so did the people. What do we file this one under? Culinary sabotage or moral indigestion?" He ignored that. His gaze had gone distant, past the orchids, past the walls. "The tragedy," he said softly, "was never in the poison, Archie. It was in the heat, the passion that made each of them forget restraint. Every man and woman in that affair mistook appetite for purpose. It is the oldest confusion known to our species." "That's poetic," I said, "but not much comfort." "Comfort," he said, "is for the innocent. Reflection is for the rest." He reached for his beer, took a slow sip, and exhaled like a judge signing a verdict. "The morale," he added, "is simple. Never let your hunger dictate your hand, whether for food, fame, or revenge." I stood, picked up my hat, and headed for the door. You know, you could have been a philosopher if you'd liked people a little more. He closed his eyes, settling back into the vast, immovable quiet of the brownstone. If I liked people, he said, I'd have less work. That was as close to tenderness as Nero Wolfe ever gets. I went out into the city, where the rain had stopped and the air smelled clean for once. Somewhere behind me, in that fortress of reason and ritual, Wolfe would already be thinking about lunch. And somewhere else, in a hospital room that still smelled faintly of tarragon and guilt, a woman was relearning what appetite cost. For my part, I just kept walking, thinking how the world keeps serving the same dish over and over, and how it never really stays warm for long. 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 Warm for long.